Discussion is it is surfaces of cerebral hemispheres. So in the demonstration class we will have the viscera of cerebral hemisphere and we will have practical demonstration of the surfaces. Before going to the dissection class, viscera demonstration class, we will be having a quick review of the surfaces of the cerebral hemisphere and why they are important. So in this picture you can see that in the viscera, the cerebral hemisphere, this surface is the superolateral surface, superomedial border, and this surface is superolateral surface. If we are on the inferior surface or the ventral surface of the brain, we can see the inferior surface of the brain, cerebral hemisphere, divided into two areas. The upper one or the anterior one is the surface which is just lying above the orbital part. So this part of the inferior surface is called the orbital part of the inferior surface, and the posterior part, it is called the tentorial surface or the tentorial part of the inferior surface. In this picture you can see the medial surface. Actually upper one is the superomedial or the medial border, and medial to it this here lies the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere. You can see this corpus callosum, which is the connecting fibers between the two cerebral hemispheres. Here in this diagram you can see this thing is the superolateral surface of the two cerebral hemisphere. You can see this median sagittal fissure in between the two, through which the tentorium is intervening in between the two cerebral hemispheres. These two surfaces are the two superolateral surfaces of the two cerebral hemispheres. Inside this fissure lies the medial surface, and inferiorly lies the inferior surface, which is further subdivided into orbital surface anteriorly and tentorial surface posteriorly. Coming to the superolateral surface again, we are at present dividing, in fact for the last 100 years, Brodmann divided this superolateral surface into different functional areas and gave separate numbers to them. But for all practical purposes, clinicians, they give a damn to these numbers. They give no importance at all to these numbers, and at present these numbers are limited just for mugging up by the students, and we ask questions regarding these numbers. This functional area numbers are asked in the questions. They are very important for the students. So on the superolateral surface, you can see from this colored diagram, this is only the superolateral surface. Here you can see the cerebellar hemisphere, and here you can see the brainstem going down. So this part is the superolateral surface, where approximately in the middle of the superomedial border you will get the central sulcus. This central sulcus is lying approximately in the middle of the superomedial border, and this is the only sulcus which cuts through the superomedial border and comes into the medial surface, and in the medial surface, just surrounding this cutting central sulcus, the area is called paracentral lobule in the medial surface. That paracentral lobule is very important because it is the center for all perineal reflexes. Okay. Now coming to the superolateral surface again. In the middle is the central sulcus. It is very important sulcus which separates the anteriorly it is the motor cortex and posteriorly it is the sensory cortex. In the superolateral surface, the anterior-most aspect is called as frontal pole, and posterior-most aspect is called the occipital pole. Here we divide these superolateral surface into different areas. The central sulcus divides the motor cortex in front and sensory cortex behind. This is labeled here as, you can see the primary motor area, area number 4, and you can see the yellow colored primary somatosensory area, area 1, 2, 3. In front of the motor area you can see the premotor area, and in front of the premotor area the part is the prefrontal cortex lying just behind the frontal pole. This prefrontal cortex is very important because here lies the emotional centers, the prefunctional association areas. It is the center for idea and plan for voluntary movement, thoughts and personality. So somewhere this area is at present, this area of all of us is working. Along with it, we are having this very important Broca's area. My Broca's area is working. It is area number 44 and 45, and I can articulate the speech and produce it by means of this Broca's functional area or Broca's motor area for speech. Here we can see that this part is divided into superior frontal gyrus and inferior frontal gyrus. Behind we are having first behind the central sulcus we are having the primary somatosensory area, followed by we are having sensory association areas. But here in the almost in the middle of the superolateral surface we are having the lateral sulcus, and below the lateral sulcus we are having 3 auditory gyruses. Okay, these auditory gyri, they are finally ending into area number 39 and 40. This is the Wernicke's sensory speech area. Okay, I am working through Broca's speech area, but as because my Wernicke's sensory area is working and giving inputs, that's why I am able to talk to you through these Broca's motor speech area. And finally in up at the extreme posterior pole, it is the occipital lobe where we are getting area 17, 18, 19 or the visual cortex, which is extending into the medial surface also. You can see the medial surface here. Here is the brainstem, here is the cerebellum, here is the corpus callosum. Actually these things will help you to identify in the viscera that this is the medial surface. In the medial surface, if you are searching for corpus callosum in the superolateral surface, then you are wrong. So whenever you are given the viscera, you will search for the corpus callosum here, then that will help you to determine that this is the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere. Here we will look for the for the central sulcus, which actually is the only sulcus which is cutting on the medial surface, and here this U-shaped area is called the paracentral lobule, which is actually the center for perineal reflexes. Very important area. I am not getting into the details of other areas. Next comes the inferior surface, where you can see this whole part is inferior surface, but the proximal part, the anterior part on the ventral aspect of or on the inferior surface of cerebral hemisphere is called the orbital surface, and the posterior part is called the tentorial surface because it is overlying the tentorium cerebelli, below which lies the cerebral hemispheres. Here we are getting the olfactory sulcus here. By its side we are getting the H-shaped orbitofrontal sulcus or orbital sulcus. This is the H-shaped orbital sulcus with medial orbital, lateral orbital, anterior orbital and anterior orbital and posterior orbital gyrus. This part is the tentorial part of the inferior surface of the cerebral hemisphere. Here you can see the superolateral surface of the two cerebral hemispheres. Okay, right and left cerebral hemispheres. In the midline they are divided by the median sagittal fissure, through which the tentorium cerebri intervenes. Inside it is the tentorium cerebri. We can see the central sulcus here. Here lies the superior parietal gyrus. Below it lies the inferior parietal gyrus. Below it lies the inferior parietal gyrus. In between the two lies the parietal sulcus. Here it is the Precentral. This white part is the precentral sulcus. This white part is the precentral sulcus. Behind it is the postcentral sulcus. This whole part is the left cerebral hemisphere. This part is the right cerebral hemisphere. This part is the frontal pole. This part is the occipital pole. Coming to the inferior surface, we are not into these yellow areas. They are actually the parts of cerebellar hemispheres, and this part is the midbrain. We are here, this part, this red part, this is actually the medial orbitofrontal gyri. Here we are getting that H-shaped orbitofrontal sulcus, so that this part is the lateral orbitofrontal gyri. And here on the median plane, we are getting the medial orbitofrontal gyrus. This part which is overlying the orbit is termed as the orbital part of the inferior surface of cerebral hemispheres, and this whole part belongs to the tentorial part of the inferior surface of cerebral hemispheres.